My name is Laura Dant and I'm the PCA Region Focus Coordinator. Welcome to the third quarter HPDE webinar presented by Mia Walsh, PCA National DE Chair. Before we get started, I have a few things I would like to cover. This webinar is being recorded for future use for those who cannot attend. As a bit of housekeeping for the webinar, everyone will be muted as this helps to eliminate disruptive background noise. I would also like to draw your attention to the Ask Question feature located towards the bottom right of your screen. If during the presentation you have a question, you can submit it there. We will be reviewing submissions during the webinar and if possible, address them on the call. Otherwise, we will follow up with you later with a resolution. So without further delay, Mia, if you're ready, I'll hand control over to you.
Laura, thank you so much, and welcome to our PCA HPDE and club racing leaders and our instructors in the HPDE program. I am so thrilled to finally welcome Pirelli to our continuing professional education series. We have been very much supported by Pirelli over the years. PCA has benefited from their kindness of generosity for funding our programs, as well as all of the technical advances that they're giving to us so it can be faster in our race cars. Tonight we have with us Patrick Dragosei, and he is coming from the Atlanta, Georgia Pirelli office. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him, but I also would like to welcome Meghan Gilmartin. She is our account rep, and if you attend any of our PCA treffins or parades, or she gets to go out on sea representing Pirelli, Meghan is our perpetual person in charge of Pirelli and suffers through all of the amazing and wonderful journeys that we have together. So a big welcome to both of you. I'm so excited to have you. Let me just tell you a little bit about Patrick. He has been has built a really strong technical expertise at Pirelli across both the motorsports and the high performance road tire development. And he began in the motorsport research and development working on rally, GT, and other products. And he was the lead F1 engineer, and he led the design and launch of Formula One's first 18-inch tire. And I know, Patrick, we had a lot of questions about tire diameter sizing, so I know that you're going to address some of that. I know my race car has bigger tires on one side and in the front and the back, and smaller tires in the front. So hopefully you're going to talk a little bit about that with Pirelli. In North America, he managed the OE technical programs for the OEMs, and now he serves as the key account manager and leading strategic technical development and projects. Meghan, you picked a great guy to be presenting to us tonight, and we cannot wait to hear everything that you both are going to be telling us about the wonderful Pirelli tires. I'm Italian, couldn't be happier that you guys are sponsoring us. So Meghan, would you like to say hi before Patrick begins?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Mia, for having us and everyone for joining. I know we've probably been talking about this for a while, so I'm really happy we could make it happen.
Excellent. Patrick, you did get some questions from us in advance, but I know that you have a lot of things to cover in our 55 minutes that we have left. So I am going to toss it over to you to tell us about what's going on in the Pirelli world.
Absolutely, and thank you very much for the very kind introduction. That's I hope I don't disappoint. Yes, I received a lot of very good and very specific questions, so that was actually very nice to see. And a lot of the questions I'll try to basically answer them throughout the presentation, and then some of them I'll leave them at the end as some were a little bit more specific. And of course, if there's any other questions during the presentation, so if I understood correctly, they can write questions in a section. I don't know if Mia, then you can help me out. I might not be able to see them.
I will toss them your way. Yep.
Okay, great. So let's get started. So we'll go over a few quick introductions. I think my introduction was already done, so we can skip through that. Then the idea of this kind of tech session is to go briefly a little bit into the company overview, the partnerships that we've had with different OEMs, with Porsche, all of the benefits that has brought. We'll talk a little bit about the Pirelli product range, the new product range that we've come out with now, and some of the technologies involved in that. And then we'll do a deep dive into what basically it happens behind the scenes when we're doing an OE development. So when we're developing tires for a brand new platform or a facelift, for example, of a known vehicle platform, as well as what happens in the development of a replacement tire line. And then we'll look at a few exciting products that we're launching in the US, including the Collezione range, which is our kind of historic tires, our classic tire collection. And then finally, we'll touch a little bit on another topic, which has always been, I think, of interest, especially recently, which is tire aging and the different kind of phases of it. So I think we can skip through this a little bit. This was just to kind of explain a little bit my background in tire development and tire technology and within Pirelli. So before Pirelli, I worked very briefly as a development engineer in a rally team in rallying and touring cars. Then Pirelli took me on. I started developing rally tire tread compounds and tread patterns mainly. So I developed basically our gravel tire for the WRC championship. After that, I dabbled a little bit in some Gran Turismo developments, some single brand championships like Ferrari Challenge and Lamborghini Super Trofeo before going into GT3 development. And then with this kind of 18-inch GT experience, I was fortunate enough to lead a group of engineers that developed, and together we developed the first 18-inch tire that Formula One saw. So this was launched in 2021. It was a completely kind of from scratch development where, again, Formula One had really been, at least from a tire standpoint, stuck in the 13-inch range for many years, where the tire had really become an integral part of the vehicle suspension. So the 18-inch revolution, if you like, was a very interesting time for all people with technical appreciation of car racing. After that, I moved here to the US. So that was 3 years ago now, as a technical and quality manager following OE developments in the US. So looking at basically all of the developments that we have with our key OEM here in America. And then recently in January, I joined the sales team as a key account manager. And I'm also following some of the strategic technical projects that we have here, which is a fancy word for saying basically I manage different projects ranging from algorithm developments that we do to new product lines. And one of the new product lines you'll see here, and in fact there was a question about it, which I was very happy to see, which means the product is already kind of getting out there. But let's go right into, first of all, who is Pirelli? Now, I'm sure in fact, I hope all of you know Pirelli quite well. The company's been around for 150 years. Many of those years have been building tires. The first couple of years, we actually weren't building tires. Pirelli was really started as just a rubber company. So they were building many different products made of rubbers, from cables to tennis balls, mattresses, and then slowly in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, Pirelli started kind of specializing into tires. In the 70s, Pirelli became a very close partner of Porsche, and basically this partnership has continued with a lot of effort on our end, and of course on Porsche in developing some excellent products, all the way to today, where we're almost at the point where every 1 in 2 Porsche that rolls out of the production line is fitted with Pirellis. This is, of course, something that we've spent a lot of effort doing and trying to achieve. One of the key points in working with Porsche was as well putting our R&D and technical center specifically for Porsche products in Germany. Porsche had this as one of their requisites, let's say, for working in some of the more prestigious vehicle models. This is a neat little poster from the 70s, showcasing kind of Pirelli coming out with Porsche. Looking on, I mean, now in these last 150 years, Pirelli has been focusing more and more on basically its global impact. So both in terms of the technology and the sustainability and innovation, a lot of Pirelli's profits are reinvested in R&D. In fact, we're at 5% reinvestment in R&D, which is, at least for the tire and automotive industry, it's one of the highest. I don't want to stay too long on all these, but one of the things that really drives technology is really the high standards that our partners kind of ask of the products that we make. So that's why a lot of the great tire and not only tire innovations have come with the partnerships with different car manufacturers. Pirelli Pirelli basically services a lot of the key manufacturers around the world. Porsche is, of course, as you know well, probably one of the most important prestige, if not the most important prestige car manufacturers. And of course, a lot of very important technology has come from partnerships with Porsche, and we can look into some of those details later on in this presentation. As I was saying, very big effort from Pirelli in R&D. So we have 2,000 people involved in R&D in over 11 countries where we have the main kind of R&D centers. There are quite a few collaborations with universities as well here in the US, and in fact here in Georgia we're just starting new partnerships with some universities here in Atlanta as well, with Georgia Tech and in Virginia. As I said, around 5% of revenues are devoted and reinvested back into R&D, and this leads to patents and a lot of other great things. And one of the things that really has been driving tire development in the past few years is virtual tire design. Now, the word AI is here. It gets thrown around quite a lot, the artificial intelligence buzzword, but this has been going on, for quite a few years now. And artificial intelligence really just means a form of algorithm which is kind of self-instructing itself and learning from, different iterations in which it runs. Pirelli has been developing this a lot in collaboration with different universities, and of course with OEMs. Porsche is one of the OEMs with which we do a lot of virtual development. This not only, as you can imagine, saves a lot of time and a lot of money during the R&D process, but it also has huge impacts from a sustainability standpoint, because it means less mule cars being built, first of all, but also less tire prototypes, because we're able to run hundreds of different tire structure and compound iterations fully simulated, and we run it both in driver in the loop and driver out of the loop simulations. And that just means either a simulation where a driver is physically sitting in a seat and he has a kind of a computer program where different tires are being let's say programmed into his simulation. And then he can drive and test and really get a feel for different tires and see how they behave with the mathematical model that we have of the vehicle. And this means that a selection of maybe 3 or 4 ideal tire structures are made before ever having built a tire. This is also used for compound development, as I was saying, where here the artificial intelligence again helps to run thousands and thousands of iterations which otherwise would be very complicated to try and model. So I didn't want to go into too many details now on the AI, but again, if there's any questions on this, we can go into more details. Pirelli is, as you know, quite an iconic brand as well. I mean, other than the fact that we've been around for many years, Pirelli is involved in all kind of branches of motorsport. I mentioned earlier Formula One being, you know, the key, the pinnacle of motorsport with which we're involved at the moment. But it's not only motorsport. We've had a strong history of let's say a presence in culture. So Pirelli has had the Pirelli calendar since 1963. Pirelli design has been kind of running and weaving in and out of Pirelli's history, you know, in the last century. Recently, motorboats, skis, and a couple of other ventures, as well as sail racing. So America's Cup with the Luna Rossa Prada Pirelli, and art. So it's, from my standpoint as well, it's been a very interesting brand to work with. But let's talk tires a little bit, and I think that's why we're all here. So this here is the new lineup of Pirelli's P0's lineup. Sorry, the new generation of the P0 lineup. A lot of the tires kind of aimed performance and you know, the objectives of a tire. You can really tell already by looking at the tread. As you can see, you know, if we start with the Trofeo RS, this is our go-to, you know, street legal tire, designed for the track. In fact, you can see on the tire shoulder, big uninterrupted blocks which give grip when you're leaning on the tire and through the corners. And slowly we make our way, basically going towards the right to the P0R, which is now the new P0 Corsa. So the P0 Corsa was the product that was between the Trofeo and the P0. The P0R has just been introduced. It's a phenomenal product. It's in fact been homologated on various Porsches and the Carrera, the 911 GTS, on Taycans, and it's a product which was born from, let's say, you know, from the history of the P0 Corsa, but it brings the same level of dry grip with significantly improved wet weather grip, which was one of the targets that in fact Porsche had requested, where they wanted to have a product which had the same kind of wet grip as the Michelin 4S, but with the dry grip of the Pilot Sport Cup. So this product is exactly on that level. The Trofeo RS, again, came from the Trofeo R, significantly more dry grip, as well as a more kind of tunable spec and structure, allowing it to become more of an OE-driven tire. So we have it homologated on the GT3 RS, on the GT3, and it's a very, very high-performing tire. Then this brings us to the new P0, so the P05, the 5th generation of P0s. And again, we can go into a little bit of details on the different changes and the structures here, but most of the changes in all of this lineup are from a compound standpoint. So new compounds have been developed with a lot of the virtual iterations that I was talking about before, meaning that we were able to achieve compounds which have basically a kind of stretched performance on all different aspects. So the wet grip for the P0R has improved without degrading the dry grip. Similarly with the P0, both the P0 and the P0E have had significant development on the efficiency of the tire. So looking at rolling resistance, with an ever-growing park of electric cars, this becomes more and more important. And the P0E, which I'll touch a little bit on, which is another very exciting product. The P0E is the kind of eco-focused tire for Pirelli. So it has more than 55% or up to 55% of bio-based and recycled materials. Now, as you know, the tire is an incredible bit of technology. One of the things that you probably have heard before, it's the only physical thing that is connecting the vehicle with the road. The vehicles can have 6, 7, even 1,000 horsepower nowadays is not so unheard of. And all of that is being transferred through a very small and a very kind of limited footprint. And all of this is running through the tire. And unfortunately, one of the properties of tire it has always been historically the fact that it uses a lot of non-bio-based, so materials which basically derive from fossil fuels and quite tricky to recycle. So there's been an increase, there's been a huge push in all of the tire industry to try and move towards having the same kind of level of performance, but at the same time trying to have a more kind of sustainable and eco-focused approach to the development. And the P0E is exactly that. So having now this kind of new benchmark of sustainability and the amazing thing is that it's without compromising performance at the moment. So it's a tire that Pirelli is very proud of, and in fact we've been again homologating it on quite a lot of vehicles. And the last product, which was one that we've been talking a little bit about earlier, and I've seen some questions on, is the Trofeo Track. So the Trofeo Track is a brand new product that was developed again for the US market. It's built in our factory in Rome, Georgia, and it was developed with the R&D team that we have in our motorsport department. So the guys who are developing the GT slicks all the way to the Formula One tires, and it was developed together with the local American R&D team. So it's a very special product that's kind of brought together these two development teams. This is the tire here. It's a DOT racing tire. So basically it's DOT marked and DOT compatible, but it is, as you can see, pretty much a racing slick. I mean, it has a couple of semi-longitudinal grooves. The objective of the tire is very much to maximize dry weather grip. It is a direct competitor of some tires that are segment leaders at the moment, like the Hoosier R7 or the Yokohama Advan AO55. The compound has been developed with all of the motorsport and racing formulation. So it's a very high grip, low degradation compound. The performance is, as I said, derived directly from our motorsport tires. It is, however, still a DOT tire, so it hasn't been designed as extreme as a pure circuit, as a DHG or any other kind of DH Pirelli tire. And what this means, and this can kind of be seen here in the radar chart, where you have things like grip and dry handling, and then overall lap time will be somewhere in between a street legal and a pure circuit tire. But then other things like the working range and the soft handling is again in between the slick and the street legal. What I mean by the working range in this case, it means the range of temperature at which the tire works. So slick tires tend to have a very narrow temperature range, and it's a little bit higher. And as if you've driven on slicks, they're a little bit trickier to get into temperature, definitely trickier than street legal tires, which tend to kind of be easier to manage and have a bit more of a forgiving working range. Slicks tend to be very, very, very narrow working range and tricky to keep and kind of maintain in that temperature range. The Trofeo Track is somewhere in the middle, so it's a little bit trickier than a street legal, but definitely easier than a pure racing slick.
Sorry, Patrick. For this one, we have the HPDE program, which is high performance driver education. And A lot of people take their street cars to the track, so they're not full out race cars. And this would be filling a gap where a lot of people might have to take their cars out on a trailer to get to the track and then swap out their tires for street tires onto their track tires to get better grip. For distance, let's say a lot of people might drive 4 to 6 hours to a racetrack for an event. Is it still something that is probably a shorter distance to and from the racetrack in your street car?
I would say definitely a shorter distance. It's not a tire that we suggest for highway use. In fact, similar with all the other DOT racing tires, they're all DOT marked and DOT compliant, but they're definitely not tires that we suggest using on highways. Apart from the fact that the grip levels on these tires is quite high, so any kind of debris and stones and anything on the highway will just be picked up and thrown onto the underbody of the car. But of course, they have very, very little wet weather performance. So if you are driving it to the track and there's any kind of bad weather that comes along, that's definitely not a tire that you want to be out on the road with. I think the intended use is definitely more so for kind of US motorsport events. So events where a car is usually trailered and taken to the track, or tires are changed at the track. The tire that is, let's say, more adapt to being able to drive to the track, get beaten up around the track, and then drive back home is more street legal tires. So a Trofeo RS or a Michelin Pilot Sport Cup, Cup or 2R, that kind of line of product. But yeah, the DOTs, I would definitely be careful about driving them for long periods on the road. This is very much a racing tire, and the reason for the DOT compliance is to be able to be used in some of the SCCA and ASA events where, for example, a DOT marked tire is a requirement. It is a pure replacement tire, which means that it's designed to be fitted to any type of race car. So whether it's front engine or rear engine or mid-engined, it's a racing tire. So it's a tire that if you want to maximize performance, you have to do some minor adjustments to the vehicle, as opposed to an OE tire where the vehicle and the tire are developed together. So there's no need for any kind of vehicle changes or of setup.
Great, thank you.
No, my pleasure. It is FSC certified, as a lot of our products coming out of the Rome, Georgia factory are now, as well as our Formula One products.
We did have one question, Patrick, on this tire specifically. I know you have some questions that were sent in advance, so this one is specific. I have to put my glasses on because the font's super small. But heat cycle question: how does the Trofeo Track compare to a DHF? Should we be able to get more heat cycles from the Trofeo Track?
Yeah, great question. So yes, short answer is yes. You should be getting more heat cycles. A quick note on heat cycles. So as probably a lot of you know, the tire has different different compounds and different elements within the tread. These compounds are a blend of polymers and aggregates. The polymers have very, very long chains, basically co-links, and with the aggregates they create a kind of very complex mishmash of polymer chains and aggregates, which make the tire basically go from a plastic material to a elastic material. Now there is such a thing as having too many cross links, and that's what happens when you over vulcanize a tire. So usually what happens is compounds are developed in such a way that once they pass a certain range, and I'll do something a little bit. I'll draw a little graph here, and let me know if you can see it. But basically, where you have temperature on one end and cross links on the other. So if here we call cross links and this is temperature, as you're increasing temperature, the number of cross links will increase. Then in a racing compound, what will happen is this will basically come to a point where the number of cross links then starts to invert. So you're actually damaging and creating a situation of over cross linkage, which will basically make the tire kind of decay and drop off. Whereas in a lot of road tire compounds, it's kind of, lower down like this, but then it stays stable. This compound is a kind of in-between, an in-between point where you're able to basically, one of the things I wanted to add here is, let's say the tire vulcanization ends at this point. So if you have many heat cycles, basically you are pushing the tire past this point, and it gets to a certain point where, you know, the tire performance starts to decay, and that's when you've had too many heat cycles and the grip starts to fall away. On a more kind of road tire type compound, you're actually never really kind of moving too far away from the maximum level of grip. Now there's other kind of phenomenon that take place so that the grip is always dropping away a little bit, but that's not really due to the increase in cross linkage, but it's due to other phenomenons which are degrading the tire. This compound is somewhere in between, so that you have a lot more heat cycles that you're able to use without having the grip kind of fall away quite as much as a slick. It is, however, still a slick derived type compound, so it will have a certain kind of number of limits of heat cycles. Now, how many heat cycles, that depends a lot on the temperature that's reached. So if the tire is always kind of brought within a kind of target of, and I need to translate this to Fahrenheit, forgive me, let me just get a translator, but it's around usually 90 degrees Celsius to maybe 110 maximum, which in Fahrenheit is around 194 Fahrenheit to a real maximum surface temperature of, let's say, 200, 220 Fahrenheit. If the tire is kind of kept within that range, it will have a lot more heat cycles. If the tire is overheated, then again, that temperature will, you know, kind of increase the cross linkage, and at that point, the tire will start to decay more by the time the next cycle takes place. Just thinking if there's anything else that we had to say about the heat cycles. I think that should be enough. Okay, so we can talk a little bit about the development that goes on behind the birth of a new product line. So a new product line, and by that I intend, for example, the new Scorpion XTM or the new P0R or the new Trofeo RS. So it's quite a long development process that basically takes us in the range of usually 2.5 to 3 years. The first phase is the development phase, where R&D basically receives a series of targets, both from OEMs and from the markets, and therefore the need of a new product is basically established. Then a very long and lengthy development process takes place, which we'll see, and takes us into the industrialization phase, where the tire is then taken from a prototype all the way to being able to produce it in high quantities, high volume, and in different sizes, because in the end we need to be able to have a certain product in a variety of different fitments and sizes, and all the way to the product, basically the production and maturation, where the product is then kind of fine-tuned together with the OEMs.
Patrick, we have some more of the Trofeo Track questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go back to
I believe you answered as well as you could, but it says, does your testing tell us how many full 30-minute heat cycles can you get from the P0 Trofeo Track tire? And I feel like I understood that it depended on the heat of the surface area of the surface, and and that you can't specifically give a number of the heat cycles.
No, exactly. And it depends on the heat. It also depends on a couple of other factors if we want to, let's say, talk about them all. So heat is one of the factors. Overall, what you're trying to evaluate is how much energy is going into the tire, because it's not only heat, it's also the asphalt roughness. So the rougher the asphalt, the more energy that's the more basically degrading energy that's putting into the tread. And the circuit configuration. So if it's a circuit with very fast and long corners where the tire is basically being leaned on for extended periods of time, where you have a lot of lateral forces, that will increase basically the degradation of the tire and
right.
So the kind of resistance to different cycles. So a single cycle is not only, it's called a heat cycle, but the factors that are affecting it is not only heat, it's overall. And in fact, one of the interesting things is that you have the heat cycles, but then you also have the structural kind of degradation of the tire. And this is the other thing that kind of helps the tire, but causes the tire to drop off. Because as the tire is being stressed, heated and cooled, pulled laterally, revolution after revolution, the cords, the wetting compound around the cords of the carcass and the belts, they slowly start to basically become softer, and the cornering stiffness of the tire starts to drop off a little bit. So that all in all kind of dictates, the overall degradation of the tire. Now, to give you an exact number, I wouldn't be able to, because it would depend on the tracks and the different vehicles, how much load the tires put under, if the tire is always kept at higher pressures, or if the pressure, the cold pressures are much cooler. I had seen quite a lot of questions as well on cold pressures, warm pressures, targets, both for I can't remember if it was on the Trofeo track, but on the Trofeo RS, on all tires. Generally, and I think it was on the DHG as well. Generally speaking, the cold pressures have to be high enough that the tire is able to have some sort of pneumatic performance, so that not all of the car weight and all of the energy basically is being transferred only through the structure. It needs to go a little bit into the air and absorb through the air that's inside the tire. That's why they're called pneumatic tires, because they require air to basically help absorb some of that energy. So on a DH slick, usually on GT applications, especially if it's a professional driver, who knows to be a little bit more careful with cold tires, you can run sometimes even 14 to 16 psi. Now, I'm not suggesting everyone can do that, because it does require a little bit more nursing of the tires when they're colder. Generally, what we advise is somewhere, I think, in the range of 22 to 24 psi, depending on the circuit. But again, that depends if the driver is then going to take a 22 psi tire and run it straight through Eau Rouge at full speeds, then where the hot target pressure is 32 psi, then that's a little bit risky. You might want to. We would suggest maybe having higher cold pressures and then bleeding the pressures, after a lap. But generally speaking, like the lower the pressure, the more the structure has to kind of bear, and therefore the higher degradation that structure is going to inevitably have.
And then as far as the availability of sizes in the
Yep.
Do you have any information on that for the Trofeo? There's a lot of different categories of racing, and they have specific size requirements. So some people were asking about that.
Absolutely. Let me see if I have this live. So, no, it's not doing what it's meant to do. Anyway, so we have a range basically from a 235 4017 all the way to a 3 345 1319, which I believe is the Viper size. 345 3518, sorry. And then there's most of the Porsche 911 sizing. So we'll have a 305 3019, 305 3020 for the rears, and again from a 245 all the way to a 275. These tires are available now. We're just industrializing this product. This was one of the products that I was involved in the development here in the US. So we've already launched a lot of these tires. So these are already available to be purchased, and some of them we are industrializing as we speak. So they will all be available by mid-October of this year. So
Great. Megan brought one to Oklahoma City so we could see it in person back in July.
And it is, and I'll just quickly jump back. I think it's also a very beautiful looking tire. It does come with the yellow incured tire stickers. So, the Trofeo Track and the Pirelli come standards, as well as the American flag, because again, it is a product for the US market, developed and built in the US. The technology that we use to build this is our Mears technology. So it allows us to have, basically the tire it's as if it's 3D printed. So it's a very cool type of tire building process, and it allows us to be able to have the tire stickers cured directly onto the tire.
So I was at your facility down in Rome, and there you had a lot of testing. A lot of testing rooms and testing options there for performance. Do you test against other manufacturers at all? And
absolutely.
What would you compare this one to if you were to pick a couple of the more popular ones?
Yeah, so our direct benchmark for this was the Hoosier R7 and the Yokohama Advan AO55. They're the two kind of segment leaders in the DOT racing space. So they were the main ones that we were using to benchmark. I mean, of course, we were testing with a lot of different tires as well, but we quickly found that those two were the most consistent and the quickest times. And the thing with this product, one of the main requisites, the two most important things were to have a quick, kind of quality type of lap time and low degradation. So have a lot more consistency lap after lap. And this tire, I'd say, achieved both. It's quicker than the R7, and it's definitely more consistent.
Okay, that people want to know where when they are available out in October, where would they be able to get them?
These are available on TireRack.com. With our partnership with TireRack, we have these available, and I believe it's exclusively through them. So this will be, through TireRack.
Okay.
Through the Pirelli website, of course, but I think that will then redirect to the TireRack.
I have some other questions that are popping in, but I don't want to take away from what you have already prepared to answer or to talk to us about. Certainly can roll over. We have 12 minutes somewhat set there. Okay.
Yeah, I'll kind of jump through some of these slides. I think there's a couple of interesting points in the next few ones which we can look at. Here we're just kind of showcasing some of the simulation work that's done when developing a new line of tires. So we characterize each element within the tire, the tread, the sidewall, everything to run simulations and basically help us design an ideal tire. And this is from a footprint standpoint to a rigidity, a performance, a degradation, energy, so thermal and rolling resistance and everything. So this allows us to draw, for example, new tread patterns that actually have, a kind of an actual function and aren't just aesthetical.
Patrick, I want to just say that a lot of people are saying we can run long. This is really interesting stuff.
Okay.
So don't worry about a hard stop.
Okay. Yeah. Again, like I'm not sure how much detail we can go into. I mean, I know some people will maybe be more intrigued by the technical details. Other people might be a little bit bored. So I'll try and keep it like a bit of both.
Everyone here is here for the technical details. We're all track people. We want to be fast.
Fantastic. So as I was saying, the different details, the different features of the sidewall, on an XTM tire, that could be the shoulder, but on a slick tire, that could be the profile on the shoulder and how that interacts, for example, with the curb. One of the things that we design for a lot now, especially in newer tires, is looking at how, for example, as we're cornering, as the tire is deflecting and bending under the rim, what does that look like when a curb is impacted? Which part of the structure, which part of the belt impacts, and how can we kind of modify the structure to have different parts and improve the integrity? The other part here, which you can see, is the compound development, and this again is something that it's very tricky to get right and requires a lot of different iterations. Here you have basically the glass transition temperature of different compounds. So it's this point here. This is the point at which basically the compound goes from being elastic to back to fully plastic, hence glass transition. Now, the colder this is, generally the better the compound performs in the cold. But usually it also means the compromise is on the other side in the hotter parts of the site of the compound life. The thermal degradation is much higher, so it means the compound kind of tends to fall apart. Which is why usually, for example, you have all-season tire and all-weather tires, which will perform quite well in like an all-weather tire, for example, will perform quite well in the cold, but inevitably it will degrade a little bit more in warmer weather, just because of the nature of how the glass transition and the modulus of the compound works. Now there are some things that can be done. Usually it's new materials that are used as aggregates. So instead of using, for example, carbon black, which has always historically been the main aggregate used for tires, we use other compounds like silica, nano. A lot of them actually have basically nano-engineered type of silica aggregates. These help to have a higher basically a lower glass transition temperature without too much thermal degradation at higher temperatures. Carbon black is a carbon black mixed with resins and oils, which are all very kind of unhealthy and anti-ecological things. But the mixture of natural rubber, carbon black, and oils and resins is phenomenal for grip, which is why most race tires have those three inside them. They do, however, have a very high thermal capacity, very high modulus, but they also degrade a little bit more because the compound is also softer. The wear rate is higher, for example. So there's a lot of interesting work that goes in the kind of initial phase of a new product line, which allows us to kind of really hone in into what the targets are of each product line. So if we're designing an all-terrain product, if we're designing the new P0R, which we want to be somewhere between the P0 and the Trofeo RS, for example.
From a track tire, does the P0 track benefit or need to do heat cycling? Like, should the drivers be worried about that, or is there a benefit to do that?
So generally, if what the driver is after is the fastest first lap possible, I would say no. I would say warm up the tire in your out laps. So find the perfect cold pressure that gets you a stabilized pressure exactly where you want, and use that warm up lap as you're coming out. So your out lap to heat up the tire, and the highest grip it will express is in that first lap. The first kind of time lap, if the warm up is done properly and with the right kind of evolution of energy input. If This will, however, cause a bit more of a steeper decay towards the end. Now, again, much less than other competitors that we've seen, but if we're talking in absolute values, it will have a slightly higher degradation. If overall longevity of the tire is the main objective, then yeah, maybe a softer initial heat cycle, so maybe a couple of warm-up laps will be ideal, or the heat cycles that some people can do indoors as well. Those also work. I've always been a lot more used to doing them on the track. As we're doing development work, all of these usually are done out on the track, and it seems to be a bit more effective. But that really varies on personal preference as well. It's unfortunately one of those things that, from a science point of view, we found that on track is better, but then we found a lot of customers that prefer to have, for example, indoor, the first kind of heat cycle done indoor, and that's fine as well.
And then what about for our racers out there, where we have some of the longer endurance races, like 30, 40 minutes to an hour, 90 minutes. We have all kinds of different lengths of our racing and track time. What would be, how many heat cycles ballpark for if you're doing longer things? How much degradation would that incur rather than just doing like a 30-minute session if we're doing 90 minutes on those tires? Just kind of talk a little bit about differences in that.
Again, depending on the track, but I expect, if you're doing a 60, well, like much longer sessions, the main concern passes from being the heat, the number of heat cycles the tire is able to sustain, to the actual kind of tread wear life of the tire. I think at that point the tread wear would probably finish before, and this is in general on most slicks or DOT slicks. If you're running a tire at a kind of race pace for for an hour, that's usually the end of the tread, generally speaking.
And then we always talk about, going out. What's the lowest pressure recommended cold to go out on the racetrack to heat them up? That's a big question I debate with my in the paddock a lot when we're going out. And obviously it depends on the temperature outside and the temperature of the asphalt, but what's the lowest pressure recommended cold to go out and heat them up in a session?
On a GT slick, again, I think our official like company line is I forget if it's 22 or 24, but somewhere around that PSI range. Now, the tire is able to take less pressure than that, of course, but as a company, we can't say across the board, oh yeah, you can go at 12 psi and it'll be fine, because then somebody will, as I said earlier, somebody will take the car at 12 psi and do a very aggressive corner at full speed, and something will happen, and it's
right. Yeah,
it's a liability that unfortunately. But if you're going to the racetrack, it's something as well that you can experiment with, right? So when the tire has a much lower pressure, when we're looking at 16 psi, for example, you can really also feel through the steering wheel, the relaxation length of the tire has increased significantly. The cornering stiffness is all over the place. The front to rear axle are kind of just not really in sync. So you can feel that the tires aren't quite there. So at that point, if you bring the tires up slowly and gradually, and you bring heat into the brakes, and you allow the tire to kind of warm up properly, you can run quite low pressures, and it will be totally fine. As I said earlier, the fundamental thing is that when you have low pressure, air isn't there to help support the tire structure. So all of the kind of energy that you're putting into the tire, so whether that's like very aggressive accelerations or prolonged high-speed corners, all of that will impact the tire structure. So it's something you don't want to do too much of, because then you risk having, for example, cold damage happen within the compounds, in between each of the carcass plies, and then that can kind of potentially cause a bulge or some sort of separation within the tire. It's rare for, especially modern beads, it's rare for a tire to debead at low pressures. That's something that used to happen a lot more, I think, in the past. Now with the modern materials that we're using in the tire beads, that's less of a concern. But I don't have, unfortunately, an exact answer, because
that was a good answer.
yeah, as I said, like officially it depends on the product, but I know it's GTs, I think, are like, as I said, 22 to 24. On the Trofeo Track, I think the same. We have maybe this one's a little bit stiffer in the sidewall, so you could probably get away with 4 or 5 psi lower than you would on a slick. But it also depends on what you're, I mean, fundamentally the cold pressure depends on, as you're saying, temperature, the pressure that you want to target, of course. So you have to look at, I mean, air behaves for the most part as an ideal gas. Sorry, I was forgetting the ideal gas law. So air behaves as an ideal gas. So there are online as well little graphs that you can look at to kind of see, okay, at what temperature you have one temperature and pressure, and then more or less what your final temperature is, and you'll figure out, and you can calculate what the final pressure is. And you just use this little calculation to give you an estimate of what kind of, and you work backwards from there and see what cold pressure you want.
Someone suggested running skid pad laps at varying temperatures to see where the grip level and the optimal hot tire pressure. So skid pad.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The skid pad for the lateral grip. Yeah, that's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing you want to be careful with, and this is one of the things that happens with race tires, is graining. Because in skid pads, what can happen is you start getting graining on the surface of the tire, so that can affect your grip levels, because you're no longer kind of working on a perfectly homogeneous surface, but the surface starts to have little grooves, and inevitably it just means that there's less contact of tire to tarmac. So you can see some degradation that you think is maybe due to temperature or pressure, but actually it's just the graining. So there you just have to keep an eye on, a physical eye on the tire, let's say.
All right, I won't keep interrupting. Go ahead.
No worries. No, it's good. I like the kind of back and forth. All right, I'll just jump forward a little bit. I mean, here we're talking about, again, virtualization. So a lot of, once we prototype, then we have this kind of long period of kind of cross-referencing the virtual world and the real world, to make sure that, first of all the correlations are there, and second, that everything then that we learn from the physical prototypes is then fed back into the model, so we can reiterate with more accuracy. These are different testing benches and testing materials that we have. So on the left over here, you have some of the outdoor testing that we do. This is the tire building. These are, this is a fantastically annoying little test called the plunger. This is one of the requirements of, this is one of the unfortunate kind of archaic tests that tires have to go through, where basically this metal plunger is quite literally plunged into the surface of the tire, and here it is right there. And the tire, and to be able to have DOT approval, the tire has to withstand this plunger. Now, I firmly believe that modern tires, if you're running your car into a metal plunger at full speed, you would expect the tire to burst. I think it's kind of intuitive, but it does mean that we are very limited on the type of belt materials, especially that we can use when we're trying to achieve DOT certification. And this is not just Pirelli; this is all tire manufacturers. The DOT plunger is a nightmare, and it means, as I said, the belts have to be very thick, so it's very tricky to balance high performance with such kind of thick and and kind of ballistic resistant belts. This is just a drum test, and here we have some tire sections. One of the parts, I'll touch very, very briefly, and I know we're over time, so I apologize for that. I wanted to touch a little bit on specifically OE development and what makes OE development so special, and also so difficult to kind of achieve. Now, of course, we know that all vehicles are very different one to the other. I mean, here we have 3 examples from the Mercedes GTR to the Ferrari to the Porsche. All of them have different engine placements. Therefore, all of them, just from the engine standpoint, have a completely different weight distribution. Now, they also have different suspension kinematics, different suspension arm points, some of them even different suspension philosophies. So it means that not only each axle works in a different way, but the interaction front to rear axle is completely different. And so that is something that the tire has to the tire design and the tire structure has to be done in such a way that it matches the vehicle. And that's why having, for example, an N-Spec tire is so important, or having, if you have a Ferrari, an F-Spec tire, and a Mercedes MO, and etc. Because it means that that tire was designed with that vehicle perfectly in mind, and not only for this kind of more performance oriented characteristics, but also for everything else. The OEMs have a very long list, and we can go into that here now.
One of the questions that came up for that, I'm sorry.
Absolutely. Sorry.
And I don't fully understand this question, but perhaps you do. Could Patrick comment if these tires put additional strain on other components?
So which tires?
That's why I don't. Maybe I don't understand that question.
Yeah,
so.
I'm just thinking how I could rate. I mean, generally, yes, tires do put more stress on different components. For example, if you're running tires with significantly different either grip levels or cornering stiffness levels compared to what the car was designed for. So an example is if you put slick tires on a standard road car, which maybe doesn't have the suspension arms designed for such high levels of lateral grip. So and the same with the brakes. That could be I think what the question was intending. But basically looking back at OE development, so the development, for example, of the Trofeo RS for the GT3 RS, or the new P0R for the 911 GTS. So Porsche and all OEMs send a very long target letter, which basically has all of the requirements that they have for a tire for a new development platform. And this ranges from all of the performance attributes, grip, wet grip, noise, rolling resistance, cost, mileage, everything. Basically, then the tire manufacturers take that, they decide, do we have a product that's able to meet these? Do we need to create a new product? Are we able to basically respond to each different element? So then basically a technical proposal is made, as well as a cost estimation, and then the OEM decides which is the best offer, and then awards the supply. And that's usually 2 years before the beginning of the vehicle and tire production. Then 2 years more, like a year and a half of development take place, where, as I said earlier, there's a long part now of virtual tire design, which takes place before the prototyping, and then outdoor and indoor testing and all of that fun stuff. And then the tire is taken from a prototype phase, with a lot of scrap and a lot of difficulties in manufacturing, and it's taken through a very rigorous quality optimization and industrialization process, where the tire is then fit for large scale production. One of the other interesting things, and this again goes in line with the concept of OE tire development, is that there are many different, even within the same size and the same speed rating of a tire, there can be many different structure, compounds, and structure and compound variations. So you can have, for example, different bead geometry types. So that means how the tire basically sits on the rim itself, because as we were saying before, the tire is the only part of the car that's touching the floor, but the bead is the only part of the tire that's touching the rim. So all of that braking force, or all of that acceleration force, and all of the lateral forces coming from the road are actually going, and we can actually see it even better here, all of the forces from the tread and from the car are all being transferred into this tiny area right here. So for example, the design of this, of the flipper, all of these components is very, very important to how the tire feels and behaves and transfers loads. Because in the end, yes, there's air inside the tire, but the actual physical contact point is all through here. And that's it. There's no other point of the tire that's touching the car. So here we can see the different, some different design variations, in some different cars. So for Porsche, for example, we can see the tire has a monoply construction, so single ply. It has a very, very small bead filler here. The flipper also is quite small. It's of a hybrid nylon and Kevlar material. Whereas usually cars like Ferrari and Lamborghini, they tend to have a full aramid, so full Kevlar bead, because they need to have a lot more kind of a much more stiffer response, as well as, for example, the bead protector. One of the things that, again, Porsche, especially for 911 type models, always requires a bead protector. Lambo, no, they don't care about it at all. And same with Ferrari, they go straight for a more kind of racing type compound. So this is, again, I'm sure you all know the
interesting graphic, actually, really very, very interesting.
Yeah, and these are all 305, 30, 20 tires, a couple of different vehicles. But again, the type of belts used, the top belt here, actually, I can try and zoom a little bit. So the top belt here, and you can see it a little bit better here. These are aramid plies. These have a huge, huge impact on tire behavior. In fact, this is one of the biggest factors that you can have. And all of these are different materials, different types of overlays. These basically allow the tire to either be flatter or a little bit more rounded. So for example, the difference between a front to rear tire, a lot of that is in the ply line and in the 0 degree belt. And that's what really kind of dictates the way the tire's footprint is kind of drawn out. So
that is what the manufacturer told you they want, or you guys propose something?
So yeah, the manufacturer requests a performance, and then we translate that performance into a tire spec, basically. So we understand that they want a certain type of front to rear cornering stiffness, for example, and we know the weight distribution of the car, we know the power, we know the suspension dynamics, and then we decide, okay, how flat do we want the rear tire to be? Usually we are also given a kind of upper and lower limit of the tire size, and that's just due to the bodywork. So Porsche will say, like, look, the new GTS, on the rear we have this much space. They send us usually it's called like the black box, so we get literally a kind of 3-dimensional space in which the tire needs to fit, and then they usually have a rim preference. Again, these are done with tire experts within the OEM, so they know more or less, the rim fitness or the rim size that the tire can have. Then it's up to us to decide what size and how big to really go. And then it is a two-way communication, because in some cases, and it has happened in my experience as well, where it actually happened with Ferrari, where they sent us a request for a size, and we said, guys, the power that you have on this car, the rear is brutally under-tired. Like we need to move up a whole size. So you're going to have to figure out, a little bit more space, or increase the outer body, or do something, because this tire is never gonna be able to give you the performance you want. And we even said, like, if anyone else is saying that you can do this, trust, like, these are all of our simulations, like, this is not possible. And luckily they believe, we went to Maranello, did a full kind of driver in the loop run on their simulator, and we found that we needed a bigger size. And this happens with all OEMs.
Got it.
Again, we're a little bit over, but the last kind of product I wanted to touch on is the Collezione. I don't know if any, in fact, I imagine a lot of the Porsche guys here will have a classic. Pirelli again has been, and as I was showing earlier, we've been in the tire game now for quite a few years. Just over 150 years. A lot of the iconic Pirelli tires from the past have always been paired with very iconic cars, of course. So what Pirelli has done is we decided to bring back a lot of the classic tires, taking all of the molds that we had from all of the kind of historic time periods, all the way from the 50s to modern times. Some of the molds, and this was a really incredible kind of effort. Some of the molds, we had them in the factories, in the deposits, just hiding away under a thick layer of dust. Some of them were completely destroyed, so we had to take the old engineering drawings, which luckily we have, and rebuild them. And so we are basically the aim of this relaunch was to use modern tire materials with the old tire molds, so to have the tires look exactly correct according to the era, but without having to give up, modern materials, modern tire performance, and modern tire safety. Because one of the things that's really come a long ways is really the safety of tires. Modern tires are, extremely reliable and efficient. Unless you get a really big, thick nail running through it, it will do everything it's supposed to. So these were some of these are some of our kind of archive images of how tires were built. It was all manual at the time. Modern tires, for the most part, are ever more automated. Some of our more niche products are still handmade, just because of the increased kind of attention to detail that a human operator can have instead of a machine operator. But it is, of course, as you can imagine, significantly more expensive. So we reserve it usually for the very kind of elite tire. So Formula One, for example, the first stage of the tire construction is entirely manual. Then the second stage with the compounds is automated. Again, this is an example of one of the old engineering drawings of the P0 Asimmetrico, which is this tire here, which was basically now reintroduced and is available for all of the classic tires, all of the classic cars. Sorry. As I mentioned, so we have the ranges basically from 1947, I think. Oh, Stella Bianca, even from the 20s. So it goes even further back than I thought. This was from the Parigi Pechino, so the Paris Pekin race. So the Stella Bianca was a motorsport tire to start with, as is most of Pirelli. I mean, Pirelli and motorsport really have gone hand in hand since the beginning. And I did have tire aging. This will be super quick. I don't want to steal everyone's time for too much, but
we have a lot of sidewall questions, so I'm sure.
Okay. All right. So we'll talk very, very briefly about the sidewall, but
no, I mean beforehand.
Okay. These are the kind of main three compounds that are facing the outside world, in a tire's life. So it's the anti-abrasive strip, which was the part of the tire that I was saying before that is the only part that is in contact with the rim. The tire sidewall, which usually has all of the decals and then legal writing for road tires, and either the tire sidewalls or the barcodes, and then the tread, which is the part of the tire that touches the asphalt or the tarmac. So the sidewall usually doesn't have to have any grip, but it still has to undergo very cyclic and very extreme deformation. So it's basically, it contains a specific type of wax which constantly blooms towards the surface and allows the surface to kind of maintain a protective coating layer. And this protective coating layer allows the compound to remain in its ideal conditions without drying out and therefore kind of basically fracturing and becoming plastic again. So one of the things that rubber inevitably needs is some sort of either oil or wax or something to protect it from the ozone. Otherwise, the polymer chains will inevitably start to decay and react with the environment, and that will basically create these kind of effects on tire age.
Mm-hmm.
What accelerates, and the same with the tread, now just going back, the tread instead, since it has to have high levels of grip and very, very high thermal kind of capabilities, wax is not stable enough. So instead we use oils and resins. Resins is also something that allows us to kind of have adhesive grip. There's two types of grip. There's mechanical and adhesive. Mechanical is due to the elastic kind of property of rubber, right? So rubber deforms and grips around the different surfaces of the road. Adhesive grip is literally like sticky tape, which basically sticks. So the resins allow the tire to have also kind of adhesive grip, and that's on an actual atomic level. So if any of these two elements, so either the wax in the sidewall or the oils and resins in the tread, start to run out, then the tire basically starts to manifest these types of aging characteristics. These can be accelerated by different things. So UV exposure, for example, so sunlight will dry out both the oils and the wax. Extreme temperatures, so very, very high hot and cold cycles. So again, with a race tire, if it usually you never see this in a race tire because it means you're doing so many heat cycles that if you're not wearing the tire, then maybe you're running a Monte Carlo or something where the tire doesn't really wear that much, but in most cases this never happens. Tires, and the other thing is, for example, high air circulation. So if the tire is in a place where there's a lot of wind, that will also dry out inevitably the tire. And yeah, underinflation. So as I was saying before, because the sidewall has this very, very extreme deformation and flexion of the flexion, if that happens too much, basically all the wax within the sidewall sort of runs out, and at that point, then every time the tire is used, more and more of these cracks will appear. Now the thing is, once these types of crack appear, it means that the tire is finished. Before these appear, it doesn't mean that the tire hasn't worn out, but it does mean that if visually the tire looks fine, chances are it will still be able to run for a little bit. But once you start having these types of cracks, and these are within the tread, it means the tire at that point is beginning a kind of decaying process where it will probably still be fine and will still roll, but its performance will be lower. For example, the tread will have less oils and resins, so the grip level of the tread will be quite a bit lower. The sidewall will start to get stiffer because instead of having a nice elastic characteristic or kind of performance to it, it will start to become more plastic and brittle. Ultimately, it does become a kind of integrity concern because these cracks can propagate up to a certain point, and then they can basically break. Then you have tire discoloration. Now, some of it is just due to blooming, and sometimes, if it's a newer tire that has a bit of discoloration, just cleaning away the wax and it will be sufficient to kind of making the tire look new again, and it will very much be as if it's a new tire. But as I said before, if UV exposure, heat and oxidation, or chemical exposures or other things, these can cause kind of the wax and other elements within the tire sidewall to basically be permanently discolored. Yeah, and that is it in terms of the presentation. So first of all, thank you to everyone for sitting through a little bit extra time. I am open, of course, to any questions if there still are any.
Well, there are a couple that you answered already. And I think the only lingering one was talking a little bit more about the contact patch and not specifically, but regarding the size and width of the cars and the contact patch, but there wasn't wasn't a really defined question. So,
well, I think I remember there was one of the questions you'd sent to me, right, where there was a question about, well, there was one about why the staggered fitments, right? So why a bigger tire sidewall on the, like a 35 on the front and a 30 on the rear, and then there was another one about wider tires and higher grip. So the staggered fitment is, I mean, it really comes down to the two objectives of, the objectives of the front axle and of the rear axle. So the rear axle really needs to be able to, I mean, in cars which have staggered fitment, by and large, they have rear traction. So it means the rear has to be responsible for putting down that amount of power, but still maintaining, enough stability. So the rear has to have a kind of lower sidewall ratio, so technically a lower sidewall, to be able to have less torsion of the tire structure, but still basically enough to be able to handle grip, but still have lateral supports with basically all of the weights that the cars have at the rear. Whereas the front needs to be able to have a slightly higher sidewall because of the directionality of the front. So the front needs to direction the vehicle, and therefore it will tend to have a slightly rounder tread profile and needs to have a slightly higher sidewall with more carcass ply to kind of allow for a slightly lower S2, which is relaxation length. And that's usually the relationship front to rear on staggered fitments. Now, the reason the rear is wider is grip. It is very much for the traction grip. If
that makes total sense.
Huh?
I said that makes total sense.
Yeah. So you have a wider tire allows you to have more footprint on the ground. And that's also why, for example, some cars will have also a bigger rim at the back, so an overall also bigger, bigger tire in the back.
Excellent. All right. Well, I think we are finishing up 10:27. We got a 30-minute extra bonus with Pirelli, so thank you very much. This was a much requested training from our instructors that are out there and the drivers that are out there and the racers that are out there, and we are extremely grateful to Patrick and Meghan and Pirelli for giving us this time. I may have a question or two that pops through. I might just forward to you and get back to an individual. We can't answer all the questions live.
Yeah, absolutely.
So again, Laura, a big thank you to Pirelli, grazie mille, to Patrick and Meghan, and all of the people participating tonight and all of the ones who are going to be watching on the recording. I'd like to wish you all a great night, good evening, and look forward to seeing everybody out at the track. Good night, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye. Thanks very much.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
And looking then at some of our replacement lines. So the lines that we were looking at before, these were all the OE lines, so lines that we developed basically with the car manufacturers. These are the new replacement lines. So these are lines that basically will be pure replacements, so not developed necessarily with an OEM, but developed with the final customer in mind. So things like mileage become a lot more important, and later we'll look at how these kind of distinctions are made. Again, a lot of you, I'm sure, will know the distinction between P0 and Scorpion, but P0 is our kind of car line, high performance. Scorpion is our SUVs. The name Scorpion derives from rallying and from basically the off-road tires, and then it was slowly kind of developed into SUV. P0, P7, the P7, Cinturato, these were all names of tires that were developed across the years for passenger tires, for passenger cars. So the P7, some of you will know it from the Ferrari F40, from the Lamborghini Countach, the the Lancia Delta, the Integrale, the Stratos. So this was at the time a very, very, very famous racing tire as well. The Cinturato, that was simply the first tire with radial belts, which allowed the tire to kind of maintain this this flat profile, which, as we know, helps a lot with traction and performance. One product I want to just bring a little bit of attention to is the Scorpion XTM. So this is a new all-terrain product that Pirelli has developed for the North American market, with a lot of the a lot of the objectives and a lot of the targets that the North American market, which is a bit of a particular market, has. Really, in no other market in the world is a tire of this kind of level of aggressiveness so popular. And in America, a lot of vehicles will be running this kind of tire, both for people that do off-roading and people that don't do off-roading. So this is a tire that has exceptional on-road performance, but of course, if you take it off-roading, it will do exactly what it's supposed to.